When you're getting into dice making, the molds you make are usually the best thing you know at the time. Version 1 of my molds used a very large D6 as the sprue, a ton of hot glue, and opaque silicone, where while it was much softer and easier to work with, you can't really see what you're doing inside of this thing. Version 2 traded out the opaque silicone for a transparent and kept the very large sprue on a straw, which is great for getting resin in, but also has a lot more cleanup when you're doing on a die. That's a huge gap. Version 3, the latest thing that I've been working on, moves the sprue to the face of a die, reducing the finishing on something like a D10 or a D20 down by 80%. A lot quicker to clean one side as opposed to 5. And also scales very nicely. Also using plastic to have transparent sides on every single mold, being able to see a lot better with what you're working on. In short, a lot has changed since the last couple dice making videos. And this is about way more than just the Kickstarter. So let's do a comprehensive update on the best process I found to date to create, mold, sand, finish, and ink your dice for Dungeons and Dragons. So let's talk about the updated process using this fancy new top-down camera view. For the updated molds, I'm still using Dixie cups to hold everything. I'm still using molding clay as my base. The difference here is using a toothpick and some hot glue to secure for the sprue. This makes the sprue on average a lot smaller when trying to make sure that you're maintaining for the mold. It also helps you maintain a much shorter overall sprue for a much shorter overall mold, which means much less silicone being used. Now, I use hot glue instead of drilling into my masters because I am not yet that brave. After securing the hot glue and letting it dry, slowly press the toothpick into a small amount of molding clay, which will be used as the base, and then stick that to the bottom of the cup. From here, we're back to the tried and trusty Sorta Clear 37 for our mold. Now, this is a platinum-based silicone that does not react with the SLA printing from the 3D printed masters, which is important. Some silicones won't cure when in contact with the resin from some 3D printers. Make sure you are very careful when figuring that out. Using proper safety material, including gloves, which, oh God, I hope I'm able to buy some on Amazon soon. I'm running out. You mix this part 1A to 1B. Now, we're using the same graduated cylinder that we used the last time we did molds. And I regularly do this when I do a full batch of molds, but I rarely do full batches of molds anymore. And for two reasons. One, it's time consuming to do a full set of 8. 2, you start running the risk of running out of pot life on the silicone if you're not careful. So let's start the clock now. When mixing silicone, it's extremely important to mix not only in a circular pattern, but from top to bottom. Now, this is something I mentioned in the last video, but I've seen this catch a couple people in the comments. Make sure you stir your silicone on all axes and make sure that you do so thoroughly. This is dummy thick stuff and a lot harder than just like stirring soup or a cup of water. Once that's in play, pour the silicone into all of your molds, making sure that you maintain just enough of extra silicone on top of the die to provide structural stability, but not so much that you won't be able to demold the die safely and also waste silicone. This stuff is in very limited supply, so you want to make sure that you're using just enough and you're not being wasteful. I will be honest though, I'm a little bummed that I didn't, hi dog, everyone. I'm a little bummed I didn't get to the Jumbo D20. I did have the graduations on this, which is basically set up to do 8 molds. It turns out it's pretty accurate with very little waste on top of that, which means it makes exactly 8 molds, which is good. You don't want to be wasting silicone. So that means I'll come back to that the Jumbo D20, and do that in another batch, potentially in another video explicitly around making larger D20s and what to put in them. Now we wait for the molds to cure, cut them, and go on to casting and through the entire life cycle of this set of dice. After that, they all go on the pressure pot insert, which I desperately need to make a new one, and that might be a quick video in a week or two, and off to my newly revamped pressure pot space, but it's really the same thing. I've just doubled in capacity. I cure these for at least 4 hours at 40 psi, pull them out, and start in the demolding process. I'm gonna do this on the larger D20 because you don't need to see me cut a full set, and this is the clearest of the molds since it's cast in a plastic cup as opposed to the paper Dixie cups, which finish a little bit more opaque. What you want to do is cut down the edges of your die, so this way you don't run the risk of interfacing with a number from your dice or potentially creating a misalignment on the face of a die, which would make the entire die go off kilter. Now, you still need to be very careful when aligning everything, just like you need to be careful here when you're making sure that the camera's in focus. Oh God, no. So what you do is you mix up an entirely separate large D20 mold in a different plastic cup and then come back to recording about 5 hours later and do this right, making sure to focus down on the bottom. When cutting through the silicone, one smooth pressing motion is what you want to go with. The X-Acto knife, if sharp, will not hesitate to cut through this stuff, and you don't want to sawtooth this, creating all sorts of air gaps or imperfections in your mold, which would prevent you from being able to get a clean cut and a clean seal, maintaining resin inside the casting space. Now be especially careful when coming up on your masters. You want to make sure that you don't scratch them. So here is where you want to make small, precise, and very detailed cuts. Never contact your razor blade with your master die. And if you do, a slight bit of finishing on the top 3 grits of the sanding papers we're about to talk about should be enough to take it out. If not, you have to go into more intensive repairs, which is the subject of another video. Once you have safely demolded your master, secure the mold with a rubber band and you're off for the next bit. Now, we've done quite a few different castings. This video is not about making dice, it's about making molds. So movie magic to a set of dice that we now have finished. These new cherry blossom dice that I've been designing, playing around with to mix things up from the Kickstarter. I've started using these Zona polishing papers. I've also used the 3M variant, which uses the same color coding. It's just a different brand. Now these are polishing papers as opposed to sandpapers. They maintain the same grit levels as the micro mesh pads I used to use before, but it seems like their intent is different. And with it being weave fibers instead of a sandpaper grit, it seems to come up with an overall better finish. Looking at some of the older dies that I finished compared to the ones that I'm using now, I even went back and resanded my old first set of masters, and they come out a lot better than how they looked before. These seem to be a lot more efficient, and I'm able to get through a die relatively quickly. Only about 25 to 30 rotations on each of the polishing papers, which I've cut into smaller squares in order to preserve the life of each individual piece of the paper. Small little bit of water, small little bit of sanding, and you'll see me cut rapidly through all of the different steps of the polishing life cycle. And you go from something that's raw and unfinished and looks pretty bad to something where you can't even tell which face is the one that held the sprue, and that's something to be proud of. But a die in resin only does not a finished dice make, and it's time to go to inking. For this cherry blossom set, I'm doing a 2-tone inking style for the first time ever, combining a white and a metallic gold for all of the numbers. Now what I'll do for this is paint in a little bit with a paintbrush and use my finger to wipe away the excess paint. I've seen people use paper towels or squeegees or Q-tips with alcohol on it, and just wiping a finger off very quickly and then making sure to come back with just a slightly damp Q-tip or micro mesh cloth at the very end to clean up the excess paint seems to work extremely well. I color in half of all of the numbers and then move to another die, giving that paint a slight bit of time to dry. I don't want it to get completely dry, but I don't want it to be completely liquid either. From there, after getting 2 or 3 dies as a set, I'll go back and do the other half of the ombre for the numbers. And it comes out with this beautiful white gold gradient combination, and it just looks fantastic. Now that's a set of dice, which I'm extremely proud of, and I'm keeping this one for myself. I'll make more to actually go out on the store, but I'm not making the same mistake I did with my last dice. The first one of each design are mine. So I hope you found this video very useful, and why this mold and this mold, long may they reign, while this one and this one reign supreme. If you found this video useful, a positive rating or a comment down in the comment section would be oh so helpful. I would love to know what you think. Also, other build projects. I know I've been very busy with the CNC, but I'm still doing some resin crafting, even if right now it's just making some new dice sets to experiment with. Anything that you would want to see me try out, any ideas or successes or failures that you've had using this or similar tactics, I would love to know more. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. And until next time, go out there, be good to each other, stay home, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.